Yeah. Welcome to my talk for our paper, Publicly Accountable Robust Multi-Party Computation. So, what is our paper about? In multi-party computation, multiple parties want to compute a function together such that only the result and nothing about the inputs is revealed. If a protocol is not robust, a single party that behaves maliciously is enough to prevent the others, the honest parties, from getting the result. In a robust protocol, this doesn't happen. Usually you set some robustness threshold, and if the number of malicious parties is below the threshold, you still get the result. Otherwise, your protocol aborts, and the honest parties don't get the result. With public verifiability, an external party can check if the result is correct or not. And with accountability, you can check which parties try to manipulate the result or which parties made the protocol abort if the malicious behavior was above the threshold. And verifiability and accountability can also hold if all the parties doing the multi-party computation are corrupted. All these properties together are very useful in several applications, for example, in the client-server setting, and more specifically something like e-voting, where you want robustness. You don't want a single malicious server to disrupt the election. You want the public verifiability. The public is interested in the correctness of the election result, and also the public accountability that you can see who tried to manipulate the election. And you also don't want to put trust in the necessarily in all the MPC servers. So you have to assume that all of them collude or all of them are malicious. So is there currently an MPC protocol that has all these? So in the current line of work, not really. And here is the class of speeds protocols with speeds at the bottom left, which is very efficient but has none of these extra properties. And there were a lot of other protocols that improved efficiency, but also added new properties like public verifiability. And the CFY protocol at the top has almost all the properties that we want, but it lacks robustness. So can we somehow also get the robustness for this protocol? Technically, there is a general approach, which also seems quite natural. If you have a protocol that is not robust, but it has the other properties, you just run it. If it aborts, you identify the malicious party, exclude them, and rerun the protocol without them. Like this, you get a more robust protocol. That is also the idea of so-called best of both worlds protocols. And if you combine this with the CFY protocol, you have a protocol that has all the properties that we want. But it has restarts. So what's the problem with restarts? The first thing is it's not always applicable to do this. If you go back to the e-voting example, there a restart would mean you have to rerun the whole election. And even if some people might want to rerun an election because they're not happy with the result, that's something we usually don't want. And also it's not efficient with the current state-of-the-art in MPC. You have usually an expensive offline phase, and if you restart, you also have to rerun this. So our goal is then to have a protocol with robustness without restarts, public verifiability, public accountability, and the latter two properties, even if all parties are corrupted. We construct the first practical MPC protocol with all these properties, and we also have all these properties in all of the phases of our protocol. The setup at the beginning, the offline phase where we pre-compute certain data, then the online phase where we do the actual computation. We do a detailed parameter analysis and benchmarks to show that our protocol is efficient, and along the way we also do some more technical contributions. So let's start with the basis for our protocol, the speeds protocol, because that's one of the state-of-the-art approaches to do efficient MPC. In speeds, you represent your function as an arithmetic circuit, so you have additions and multiplications over integers modulo sum prime p. And as I said before, only the result at the end should be revealed, so if you evaluate the circuit gate by gate, the evaluation of the intermediate results should still remain hidden. And as it turns out, a linear secret sharing scheme is enough to do all this. So what is the secret sharing scheme? In secret sharing, parties all have their shares, here denoted with brackets. And if they would come together, they could reconstruct the secret. But the share itself doesn't reveal any information. But usually you have additional properties, so you can do certain operation with the shares, which I will talk later about more. In speeds, you also have authenticated secret sharing here with double brackets that has then additional max to verify if a secret was reconstructed correctly. And speeds uses an n out of n secret sharing to tolerate a dishonest majority, so you need all of the shares to reconstruct the secret. So for our protocol, we have to basically change a lot of things compared to speeds. So in the online phase and in the offline phase, basically every component has to be adjusted to get the robustness and the additional security properties like accountability. So I start here again with the secret sharing scheme. In our protocol, we still have, we base it on secret sharing, so we have shares, but we also have commitments of shares, and namely the commitments on every party's share. And these commitments are public, so everyone has access to them. And then the parties have their own share and some randomness, which was used to compute this commitment for their share. And to reconstruct now, parties send their share and the randomness, and other parties can recompute the commitment, check if it's the same that they have locally, and verify based on this every single share. And because we know for every share if it's correct or not, we can use a T out of n secret sharing, so we set a certain threshold for robustness, so we don't need all the shares to continue with the computation. So I said we need certain properties for the secret sharing scheme. It has to be linear, so you can do linear operations on it, and also we need the same thing for the commitments, so linear commitments. Obviously, the commitments need to be secure, binding, and hiding. And for simulation-based security, you would need things like equivocation for commitments. That's what previous work used. But we show that you don't actually need this, and it can improve efficiency. So then you have a linear authenticated secret sharing scheme, so you can add up two authenticated shares to get an authenticated share for the sum, and so on. With this, you can compute the circuit gate by gate, at least now for the linear operations. Then there is the opening operation, which is basically what I described intuitively before. Parties publish their share and randomness. Everyone else verifies the share based on the commitments. We get accountability from that. And because we use a threshold secret sharing scheme, we also get robustness. Then multiplication is still left. That's not a linear operation. For that, we can use the popular beaver multiplication, which has so-called beaver triples, authenticated shares A, B, and C, where C is the product of A and B are uniformly random. And with these, you can multiply two authenticated shares X and Y by first masking X with A and Y with B, opening these, and then the final authenticated share of the product is simply a linear combination of the triple and the open values. Then we have everything we need to compute the circuit. We have the linear operation, multiplication, and opening for the final result. In the offline phase, we then basically just need to compute these triples. We do this based on homomorphic encryption, and as I said before, we can't just do it as in speeds. We need new and changed zero-knowledge proofs, accountable threshold decryption, and so on. And the details can be found in our paper. So I said also we need commitments with certain properties. Now I talk about the concrete choice of commitments to instantiate our protocol. We chose lattice-based commitments, and we also show in our work that they can be more efficient than, for example, Pedersen commitments that previous work used. We used commitments by Baum et al. They have many and nice properties like efficient zero-knowledge proofs, and of course they are also linear, what we need. Then because these commitments are lattice-based, for the commitments to be binding, we have to make sure that the randomness is short with respect to a certain bound. If we would just take these commitments, apply it to what I described before, it would actually not work. So There is a problem with beaver multiplication. Beaver multiplication wouldn't be secure at all. And also you can greatly improve efficiency by just some minor changes. So here is again the formula for the beaver multiplication, but now for commitments instead of the full authenticated shares. If you analyze that for the randomness, if you know that A and B are uniformly random, X minus A and Y minus B are uniformly random, so they are at least P, the prime that you compute your operations with respect to modulo. And yeah, if you then use commitments modulo P, it's not binding because everything is short with respect to P. You don't base your binding property on hard lattice assumptions anymore. Yeah, and that's not secure. If you would use just a larger prime, then you don't have the homomorphic properties with respect to the prime that your plaintexts are for. We fixed this by introducing a second modulus, but that is only for the randomness. And with this, we can even fine-tune how many homomorphic operations we can do. And the second point about efficiency, here again, how to open values, mainly the values during beaver multiplication. You just publish the share randomness and verify the commitments. If you just change this for the final values of your circuit, by doing additional work, every party samples new randomness, computes new commitments from that, proves in zero knowledge that the commitments that everyone has and the new commitments are for the same share, and then basically publishes the zero knowledge proof and the new decommitments. We have the same properties. It's still accountable and robust, but we don't need the equivocation for commitments anymore. And that's why we can reduce our parameters and save 4 times the size of our parameters, and also the protocol with respect to commitments runs like 4 times faster. And speaking of parameters and performance, here are the values for our offline phase for the parameters for the BGV encryption scheme that we use. Our parameters are higher than, for example, for speeds and related protocols, but this is because we had to do additional work to get our accountability and robustness. And they are not that far off from speeds, and luckily they're also quite a bit lower than if we would have used just Pedersen commitments. Then also we can see this in the runtime in our benchmarks. Here we compare our protocol to speeds and the CFI protocol that I mentioned before. And the CFI protocol uses Pedersen commitments, and it's quite a bit slower than our protocol. And we are slower than speeds, and that was to be expected again. In the online phase, at first it looks like the CFY is quite fast, but this is because this protocol is not robust. So it has similar properties to our protocol, but it's not robust. That's why they can use certain optimizations to skip expensive verification if there is no misbehavior. But if there is misbehavior, or if you're an external party that wants to verify it, you have to do quite an expensive verification, and that's the red dot here. That's 40 times slower than our protocol. And if you put this together with the best of both worlds approach that would use restarts to get robustness, you see if there is no malicious behavior, no restart is needed, this best of both worlds approach with CFY is fast, but just a single misbehavior and it's orders of magnitude slower than our approach, and our approach has basically the same runtime independent of the number of malicious parties. So to sum up, we have a new protocol with strong security guarantees, and it's concretely practical. There is some trade-off for the security properties. It's not as fast as the speeds as baseline with basically none of the security properties that we wanted to achieve. But we think it's a good trade-off in applications where you need these additional security properties. And because we're a protocol in the speeds family of protocols, you can use certain techniques that came along like matrix triples, which are like beaver triples, but for efficient matrix multiplication, you can just use all these techniques. If you're interested, please check out our paper, and thank you for listening.
Any questions, please come up to the microphone.
Yeah, could you comment on, I guess, like how the commitments would have to interact with extending, I guess, the speeds methodology to things like matrix multiplications or other kinds of nonlinear operations? Like, do you also need to be able to come up with commitments for the triples for these operations?
I didn't hear most of what you said. Maybe can you just repeat it again?
Yeah, can you comment on how, on whether or not the way that you're using commitments would impose additional requirements on doing a speed style extension to more complex multiplications like matrix multiplications?
We use these lattice-based commitments. They are like based on ring or module, LVE, and so on. So yeah, if you're familiar with this, you basically have a lot of slots in your commitments. And currently, we just say we want to compute the same circuit, the number of time slots in parallel, and then you don't have any additional restrictions. But you can use like more clever techniques too. And yeah, then you also don't have to compute the circuit a lot of times in parallel.
Got you. Thank you.
So I have a question. Actually, I have two questions, but we only have time for one. I'll tell you the other one later. So does it make sense to consider situations where all the parties are compromised? So like your thread model is actually very, very strong for public verifiability and accountability. You said something about like e-voting. But in those situations, if everybody's compromised, then privacy doesn't hold anymore. So it doesn't make sense in that setting. Maybe there are applications where it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you set your threshold, so you basically assume, I hope that 80% of, I hope that 10% of parties are not corrupted, and then you can tolerate also 10% misbehavior or so. But yeah, if there are more parties corrupted, then you lose the privacy. So that's one thing that is like a trade-off. But yeah, if you give it off to parties that you can't be sure that a high amount or all of them are corrupted, then yeah, privacy cannot be saved here. And yeah, but in other protocols where you have like robustness, if there is too much misbehavior there, you lose all properties. You couldn't have the verifiability, for example. So at least we have these things, and yeah, they are also quite important in certain cases.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's thank. Oh, sorry, we don't have time. We're running out of time. Let's thank the speaker one more time.